Just make sure that nobody has any objections to that.
Do I see any objections or hear them?
I do not hear any.
Okay, doesn't look like it. So great. Thank you all for joining us, as Stu says, on pretty short notice. I'm Terry Shum, the planning director for the city. And at the request of council members Adams and Rigg, we're holding this meeting to give you information about a proposed reuse of the Applebee's site in downtown College Park. So you're probably all familiar with it, but it's the southwest corner of Route 1 and Hartwick Road. And it's been vacant for a number of years, and it adjoins the major new development by Bozzuto, which is called Astor. And the Applebee's site was actually part of the Astor's detailed site plan initially. And even though very little changed on the site as a result of that detailed site plan, because there was a change to access and the western edge of the Applebee's site, it was made part of the detailed site plan. So I'm going to start out talking about the nature of the application that's been filed for the site. Then I'll turn to Dan Lynch, who is here representing the applicant, which is Chick-fil-A. And I think most of you know the Chick-fil-A representative couldn't be here tonight, had a conflict that couldn't be changed. So what we're currently pursuing is an additional meeting next week at the City Council work session and meeting to discuss what happened at tonight's meeting and possible comments regarding this proposal. So what we're looking at is technically an amendment to that approved Bozzuto detailed site plan. And at Park and Planning, it's known as a minor limited amendment. And when you get a minor amendment, it is not handled by the planning board. There is no public hearing. It's just handled at the planning director level, at the county level by their planning director. The city gets a referral, has a very short turnaround period, and we can submit comments. So the reason why this was determined to be a limited minor amendment is because the county has determined that there is no real change in use on the property. So you know Applebee's was a sit-down restaurant, didn't have a drive-through, it didn't have a walk-up window. The current proposal by Chick-fil-A is called Little Blue Menu. It's a new concept they're rolling out, and ours in College Park would only be the second one in the country. The first one is up and running in Nashville, Tennessee. And what it does is partners with 3 or 4 other restaurants, and not only offers the Chick-fil-A menu, but also all are part of the other restaurants' menus for delivery only. So the concept is you would order online and you would have your meal delivered by Chick-fil-A's delivery fleet or one of the third-party vendors like Grubhub or Uber Eats, something like that. There is also the option of a walk-up window. So you could place your order online and pick it up at the window that will be available on site. So the county determined that this was not a major change in use and that what was being proposed was a permitted use under the old zoning code. So there is a little wrinkle here. I think most of you know that there's now a new zoning ordinance. And the new zoning ordinance defines uses a little bit differently. So a restaurant in the old zoning code is considered an eating and drinking establishment. It can have a drive-through, it can have a carry-out window, it can do delivery. It's a broad definition, it's not specific. In the new ordinance, this type of facility that doesn't allow dining inside and is delivery only, ordered, through an app, is now called a quick, what's it called? A quick service restaurant. And that type of restaurant is not allowed in the Applebee's location. But the applicant has the ability under the county law to use the old ordinance and therefore open their facility. And that's because the county has determined that this meets the current the former definition of an eating and drinking establishment, because it can be indoor or outdoor. And they don't consider it a drive-through. A drive-through is prohibited under the old code and the Route 1 sector plan guidelines. So a lot of us looked at this and said, well, does this look and feel like a drive-through? It sort of does. And, we don't have anything like this currently. Well, we may have one other establishment that I learned of recently in the Berwyn area, but that's in an industrial zone. So, so we've been discussing this, and as I said, the staff will make comments and recommendations for perhaps some minor changes, and send those to the county staff. So with that, I think I'll just pause a minute, and Dan Lynch, who represents Chick-fil-A, is here as their attorney, and I think he may want to say a few words, and then we'll actually pull up the plans and let you see the kinds of physical changes that are being proposed to the site along with this change in use. Dan?
Do you want to take questions first? Someone has their hand up.
I actually wanted to see if you had anything to add to my remarks.
Oh, not yet.
Not yet?
Yeah. No, I have a couple comments I could make. Yes.
Okay.
As Terry indicated, my name is Dan Lynch. I'm here on behalf of Chick-fil-A, who's the applicant for this new concept called Little Blue Menu. As Terry correctly noted, we have currently pending a minor revision to a detailed site plan pending with Park and Planning. And this is subject to Planning Director review and approval, which actually means it's being reviewed by staff. And then the staff makes a recommendation. They transmit that to the Planning Director for her approval. We have filed this, as Terry indicated, as an eating and drinking establishment because it does fall within the definition contained in the zoning ordinance for an eating and drinking establishment, which generally is a establishment which prepares food for on or off-site consumption. And this proposed restaurant does meet that definition because we are proposing, and Terry indicated this in part, a number of ways in which you can order and this food. You can either have it delivered via a Blue Menu delivery person. We'll have our own delivery trucks, and that would be via an online ordering app. We also are going to be allowing private delivery companies such as your Uber apps to pick up and deliver the food. And then there will also be curbside delivery where someone can pull up, park in our lot, order, and have the food brought out to them. And then finally, anyone has the ability to walk up to our window, order, and then either dine on the outdoor eating area that we are providing, or take it home to dine at home. So that is the way that this concept works. And again, we feel, and staff feels, that this falls squarely within the definition of an eating and drinking establishment as defined by the zoning ordinance of Prince George's County. Now, Terry's going to take you through, I think, some of the changes, but again, the reason why this is being considered a minor amendment is because we are proposing very, very, very minor changes to the site. One of those is adding the outdoor eating area. The other change is that we're removing 2 existing landscape islands located behind the building in the parking lot. We are also making changes to the building, and most of those are really just kind of refreshing the building because it is old. It hasn't been updated in some time, so we're going to be refreshing and adding some new architectural features just in terms of siding to that building and then painting it, and then adding our own signage. We'll be doing other changes to the site which don't fall within this application, but for instance, we'll be removing the existing sidewalk in front of the building and replacing that. So that's why this application is considered to be minor, because we're proposing very, very minor changes, and those are shown in red on the plan that Terry has pulled up. Very minor changes to the site, and staff consider those to be so minor that they're not changing really the character of the use, and changes will not really have a significant impact on surrounding development. So, with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. And again, I apologize that the applicant's rep could not be here tonight. He had a conflict, but he asked me to attend and present and then address any questions you may have relative to this application. Terry, if you want to take him through this site, I think that would be helpful.
Okay, let's do that first. So what you're looking at on the screen, am I getting feedback? What you're looking at on the screen is the landscape plan. And as Dan said, there are very few changes here. They are in fact removing 2 landscape parking islands within the parking lot and planting new trees. I think 4 total. 2 are here at the Route 1 frontage, adjoining the 4 tables that are being added to an existing green space for a seating area, and then a tree at the southern end of the site. And it looks like one is being added to the landscape island at the entrance. So you can, if you've walked around this site or driven by, notice that there is a new road on the western end of the site that has been built by Bozzuto. And previously, there was not a road there. There was a curb cut directly into the Applebee's parking lot. So there's that. There's a big retaining wall on that edge, given the slope. And so honestly, those are the only changes of note to the site plan. But Miriam, if you want to go to the elevations, then folks can get a sense of the proposed changes there. If you can get back there. Okay, so it starts with the rear of the building, and really there's no change here except for the building. Sorry.
Dan, could you mute your mic? You're feedbacking, Dan. Thank you.
Okay, so you're looking at the southern elevation, which is the back of the, no, it's not actually. This is the western elevation, the side. I don't know why that comes up first, but it's really just being painted and some signage is being added. And then there is a canopy on that you see here on the left side of the slide that is being added. In the next drawing, that's actually the Route 1 frontage. Again, it's being painted, and the existing entry to Applebee's is being reworked slightly to have the addition of wood paneling, and that is where the pickup or walk-up window will be. And then we go to this is the rear of the building here. Again, paint and signage. And then the last elevation is the eastern side. So this actually faces Hartwick Road. And you could see it's being painted. There's additional wood paneling being added, and some landscaping being, adjusted there, along with a sign to identify the concept. So I think that's all we need to show of the plan. So why don't we open it up to questions? I did want to give
Terry, could I step in and ask for, can you talk about, it's my understanding that the current curb cut on Route 1 Baltimore Avenue it goes into the property and out to the property, but they're just proposing it as an exit only?
You're right that the existing site plan is right in, right out, and it is proposed to stay that way.
Oh, it's proposed to stay that way.
There is no change. Miriam, you might want to bring up the site plan again.
Yeah, there's just 2 or 3 things I want to point out, and then Michael, we'll go to you for the first question. But I think I want to point out that it's my understanding on the site plan, there's 4 tables for outdoor seating. So those are those kind of darker circles right there. And then I think there's another view that shows the right exit. And Terry, if you could clarify that, is it still intended to have an entrance from Baltimore Avenue, or is it exit only?
No, it is. There will be no change to that access. It's currently right in, right out.
Okay,
So
it's proposed as right in and right out.
No change.
Oh, no change.
So the new thing that is just outside the Applebee's site on the south end is a driveway that will connect to the new road that's already been built and will provide additional access to Route 1. Now that access is right out only. So city staff had proposed early on that the applicant consider closing the existing Route 1 access, because now we do have a fully signalized intersection at Route 1 and Hartwick Road, and we have this additional curb cut on Route 1 that will provide right out access. So given the fact that this property is in a walkable node, and it's desirable not to have, to limit the number of curb cuts within a block, especially a curb cut that is so close to an existing signalized intersection. So we thought that might make it a safer plan, and also provide the opportunity to expand the outdoor seating from the 4 seats all the way along the Route 1 frontage. So you could take out 5 parking spaces and create seating there, which would increase the appeal and attractiveness for people wanting to use the walk-up window and eat outside, and also make it a lot more pedestrian friendly, given the fact that this will be primarily a vehicular oriented site with this concept.
I think those are excellent ideas, Terry. And I think definitely want to give Dan Dan, do you have a response, Lynch, to that discussion in terms of limiting the or eliminating the access from Baltimore Avenue and increasing the number of outdoor seating along Baltimore?
We had this discussion with Terry on a number of occasions, and unfortunately, my client could not agree to that. And you know, I got to be honest with you, from a land use perspective, I think it's a little unreasonable, with given the nature of the changes that were proposed in the site, to require us to do such a large improvement to the site. I truly believe that should have been addressed when they were reviewing the overall detailed site plan for Bizzuto, and it should have been something that should have been addressed then, as opposed to as part of this very, very minor detailed site plan amendment. But again, we did discuss it with my client. We could not accommodate Terry's request.
All right, I think that's, oh, Dan, could you turn off your mic? You have a lot of feedback there.
Sure.
I think that's an interesting response to basically allude that you think it's a good idea, but the applicant was unwilling to make the investment. That's an interesting way to respond there. But I'm going to turn over to Michael to ask one of the first questions from the community. Michael, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. And I won't profess to know our local zoning laws, but the introduction was a little bit confusing for me. Is this amendment approval a matter of right because it's not being changed a lot, or is it something that is still needs approval and needs the city input? It's not clear to me from that introduction whether we as a community or the city have actual input here, or if this is more pro forma because this is going to be approved right away.
Yes, it is confusing. I'll acknowledge that. So thank you for that question. So I'll try to clarify it, and then Dan can probably jump in as well. This is not exactly by right. Otherwise, we wouldn't be looking at this application. But it is a minor limited application, as we said earlier, that has a limited review. So typically, changes like this are dealt with at the staff level. And so the community doesn't really get an opportunity to weigh in, nor does the city council. However, in this instance, almost a year ago, I think, Dan, is when we had the first conversation about this, and council members Rigg and Adams were involved in it. And because we wanted to share information.
I'm going to
go ahead.
Correct you. That was Councilmember Day.
Oh, it was Councilmember Day. Sorry. Yeah, Stu, you weren't on the council yet. Apologies. It was with Councilmember Day, and the decision was that a community meeting would be held to get feedback on this proposal, even though it's not required, if the applicant decided to move forward. So
does that mean, sorry, does that mean that there is, it could still be rejected? And if not, is there a process by which the approval could be challenged?
So it could be rejected, and that's a possibility. So if the city's comments that go in are extremely negative and concerning, there is a possibility, although I think it's pretty remote, that the county planning director would deny it. But that is the jurisdiction of the county planning director to approve or deny this request. So I do think, given the nature of the change, that the community input here is really, really important. And in this case, will be used to inform the city's comments back to the planning director. So this is a very unusual type of application. And if the Applebee's property had not been part of the overall Bizzuto site plan for the big mixed-use project, this would probably just be a by right application. And we wouldn't be here tonight having the opportunity to look at it and comment at all. Does that
Yeah,
help?
that is incredibly helpful. Thank you. So
Okay.
the city puts in comments informed by the community, and the county planner makes the decision. And then if you wanted to challenge it from there, that's a county regulatory process, I assume. So that's incredibly helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So Terry, I have a few questions
Can
for,
I clarify what you said? Because that wasn't quite right, Terry. Maybe, let me just make this really clear. What is before the plan, what's before Park and Planning is whether or not they are going to approve the changes to the site that we are requesting. What is not before Park and Planning is whether or not this use is permitted. Chick-fil-A could start this operation without going through this process. They can start operating for this property without going through this minor amendment process. It is a permitted use on the property. The only thing that Park and Planning is reviewing is the changes. That is the removal of the 2 islands, relocation of the trees, and the addition of the outdoor eating area and the changes to the architecture. And it's not all the changes, because some also would be permitted. So keep in mind that what is before them is not whether or not this use is allowed on this property, it's whether or not these changes are appropriate. And they could say, look, we don't like these changes, we want you to make more. They could say these changes are fine, but they're not going to outright say your use is not permitted, because that determination has already been made. It's a permitted use on this property.
Thanks, Dan. I think you're correct. It could have been that another determination be made at the county level, but it was not. So they reviewed it, determined it met the former definition of eating and drinking establishment, not the current new code, and therefore accepted this application and referred it to the city. So there's several more hands. I think, Matthew, were you next?
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Matthew Kirschenbaum. I'm a community member here in the College Park and Calvert Hills area. I think I want to expand the scope of the discussion a little bit, in that there seems to be, one could get the impression from listening to the remarks and presentation thus far from Ms. Schramm and Mr. Lynch, that what is at stake here is simply the extent of some minor cosmetic changes to the property. As some on this call are aware, there has been a fair amount of community discussion in recent days via listserv, via Twitter and other social media, the overwhelming preponderance of which has been negative with regard to this proposal. I think it's fair to say that the passions have been intensely felt and intensely voiced. There are a couple of intertwined issues that I see. One, College Park as a city, as an aspirant college town, has long been working towards a walkable downtown with the kind of establishments and amenities that are appropriate to a college town, to our aspirational peers like Ann Arbor and Charlottesville and Chapel Hill. I think it's fair to say that an industrial food kitchen with a picnic table alongside is not particularly compatible with that vision. Second, and I don't want to necessarily belabor this, but I think it does need to be articulated and go on record here. As many are aware, Chick-fil-A has a long-standing history of discriminatory and hostile stances with regard to the LGBTQ community, many of whom are our neighbors here in College Park. And in my view, this is not a business that's representative of the values of much of our community, or the University of Maryland, who is our immediate neighbor here, with some 35,000 students on campus. I think perhaps 33 or 34,000 of whom are probably pretty sympathetic to the LGBTQ community's values, and to particularly Pride Month as we have this discussion. The last thing I'll say is that the the chicanery of exploiting a loophole in the zoning laws that with which we opened as the kind of context for the discussion here seems to me to be precisely indicative of what kind of neighbor and community member we fully expect Chick-fil-A to be. And Mr. Lynch's comments just now to the effect that, you know, this is going to happen whether you like it or not, and because it's already been approved, and the only thing at issue is the nature and extent of those cosmetic changes with which we opened. You know, I mean, that seems to me to be basically initiating the relationship with the community here with a pretty big, you know, with a pretty big bird flip, so to speak. And you know, I don't find that particularly surprising. I think to the contrary, that is precisely the nature of the concern that many of the community have voiced as to whom we are letting into our midst. So that's what I've got for now. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, Matthew, I wanted to comment there. I think you bring up some really good points and said it very well. I want to go back to your point one, though, about, and I think Terry said it before and others as well, is that, you know, this is our goal as a city is to make this a walkable, inviting downtown area. And this proposal is very counterintuitive to that. And so, Dan, I wanted to ask you about the expectations for walk-up. So I had a call with the other store in Nashville earlier last week, and they indicated that the full menu is not even offered to walk-ups. And they also indicated that there's very few walk-ups that occur at that other location. And judging by even your comments, not even mentioning the biking walk-ups or even people scootering over there, that's very popular in the College Park area. Can you comment on any bike racks, biking facilities, anything for allowing scooters or other ways to encourage walk-ups?
Yeah.
And yeah,
and I'm sorry, Stu, before we get into the bike racks and
Sure.
such, I would actually be interested to hear Mr. Lynch or Ms. Schrum respond to the substance of my comments just now. Thank you.
I can comment on that because I do share your concerns. And I believe I said that I do think the county planning director could have made a different decision. Now, I know Dan's going to disagree with me, but given that this site under the former ordinance is part of the Route 1 sector plan, part of a walkable node that does not allow drive-throughs, speaks a lot about what the nature of this site should be. It should be walkable. It should present, you know, an attractive streetscape, and it is definitely part of the central core of our downtown area. So I believe the planning director could have looked at this proposal more carefully and said, oh, it looks more like a drive-through operation than it does a sit-down restaurant. And therefore, not said that it was a permitted use. So I think the planning director has that, that ability to make that judgment call, but did not in this case. So the city received the referral with that knowledge that the county had determined it was a permitted use, and we were to review the site plan changes. That's not to say our comments back to the county can't address this issue. And I think our comments can.
Thank you.
Dan?
I hope they do.
All right, thank you. John or Emily, I'm not sure who's first. John, I think you've been waiting.
Yes, I think I was. Yeah, I wanted to speak directly to that issue, Terry, that it seems like the commonality between this plan and the previous use is food is served. But food is sold in a very different way in this new plan. Many Chick-fil-A's around the county have long, long lines of cars waiting for food. Often lines of cars that extend out into the traffic. So, what is supposed to be a walkable node, we are going from a sit-down restaurant with a few cars parked outside, limited to the number of cars parked outside, to the tables inside, to an unlimited number of cars and delivery trucks and other modes of transportation and Uber Eats and other delivery services running through a parking lot and out onto our streets across curb cuts that are supposed to be walkable. And this is all in the service of a company that most of us find their values to be reprehensible. So it is an unacceptable change from my perspective, both from the nature of the way the property will be used to the values of the company that's going to be using the property.
Thank you. Emily?
Sure, thank you. So, what I heard from you, Terry, I too am not very familiar with zoning laws, but from what you had noted, because there is outdoor seating, that this now falls under the old zoning laws. So, if it was a new zoning law, it wouldn't really be applicable. So in the sense of the old zoning laws, there are only 4 tables available in this plan. 4 tables. And so the answer earlier from Mr. Lynch was that the applicant rejected the idea to add more tables to the seating area that was either requested by you, Terry, as it relates to the exit, but that there would be more tables along the Route 1 for pedestrian friendly. So because of that rejection, but also because there is only 4 tables, I find it a very odd comparison that 4 tables is a substitute for a whole restaurant seating area, which what this was and was in theory zoned for as a restaurant or a food establishment. So it sounds like, again, these 4 tables are being noted as an outdoor seating area, an attempt to make it seem like this outdoor seating area meets the zoning requirements. But yet, to be frank, it does miss the spirit of that zoning requirement to have the outdoor seating. And then actually, it's really not outdoor seating for a restaurant for comparison. To be frank, again, it seems insulting to the neighborhood that 4 outdoor picnic type tables would be thought of as a substitute for food service or a restaurant. So really the question then is, because if there's these only 4 tables to be considered as service or food service seating, will these be covered for adverse weather such as rain? Heaters for the winter, because it does get cold and no one wants to eat outside. For the cooler weather, is there fans, of course, during the heat and humidity? And if those aren't provided, even some of just 1 or 2 of those components, it really should not be considered outdoor dining. It's considered seating that you have like a regular bench on the side of a road. So if these tables are really for eating, or are they also waiting seats for the delivery drivers? As we often see in restaurants in the area, delivery drivers who are waiting to pick up their orders sit at these tables, they sit at these seats, which is fine, but again, they shouldn't be considered outdoor seating. And because of this sad little 4 tables, 4 to take place of how many seated in the Applebee's or the former Applebee's, or who could be seated inside this restaurant if it wasn't so broad, I really question that this is an obfuscation from the applicant as to the outdoor dining as within the zoning laws. I appreciate your comments if you have them. They might just be rhetorical questions. Thank you.
So thanks, Emily. Let me respond first, because the addition of these 4 tables doesn't change the nature of the use. It doesn't make it more of a restaurant. It doesn't make it a dining establishment necessarily. Those 4 tables were really not part of the original plan. They were added at my request during a very early review to help mitigate some of the you know, some of the negative features of this proposed use. Dan, I don't know whether you have a comment, but we do have another question from Gerbers.
Hi, this is Malika.
Hi,
the-
Malika.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
The thing I'm most stuck on is that their website touts this as a delivery ghost kitchen, not a restaurant. And this 4-table seating further reiterates that this is not a restaurant, nor is it attempting to be one. It looks to me as if it was something kind of just placed there, which is unlikely to be used for the purpose of people sitting down and eating, because it's 4 tables. Looking at the population that would be coming to this place, I don't think 4 tables is enough to serve those who would be coming there. And just by the fact that their website states that this is a delivery ghost kitchen, is already, well, to the point. It's not a restaurant. So that's all my.
Terry,
that's
can
my
I
only
jump
comment.
in?
Thank you,
Terry, can I
Malika.
jump in?
Sure.
Yeah, just to kind of reiterate what Terry said, the tables do not make this an eating and drinking establishment. The definition of an eating and drinking establishment is an establishment which prepares food for on or off-site consumption. So if we did not have these tables on site, we would still be considered an eating and drinking establishment. We put those tables there with Terry's guidance and as an additional accommodation to folks who will be using the walk-up window. It's not done in order to make this an eating and drinking establishment.
Dan, can you clarify that? You didn't even have a single table proposed in the initial concept. It's based on a comment that they were added.
We came to Terry with a very preliminary layout of the site. We were discussing it. We didn't have any really the site features on it other than we had the building. During our discussions with Terry, we added the area out front for eating, okay? And I will say this, that we even had that discussion before we met with Terry, but Terry just reiterated the fact that the outdoor seating would be additional accommodation. We didn't even realize, and let me be clear, this is a very new concept. We didn't even realize whether we were going to have tables inside at the time, so we didn't know really what we were doing. We're kind of just coming up with the concept. As the concept has further progressed, we made a determination that.
Dan, can I pause you there?
Go ahead.
I think that's what part of the community has issue with, is we're the potential future patrons, or at least this community in general is. And it seems that you decided to make decisions on who's going to drive here, who's going to pick up without community input. And I just want to point that out, that's one of the reasons why we're having this emergency meeting, is because we wanted to provide actual comments and we were not given the opportunity. So, but I'll stop here and turn it back over to
Well,
Terry.
again, I mean, but the concept itself is being determined here, and it's being determined at our other site in Nashville. It's an overall concept for the company, how the Blue Menu is going to operate. And again, you know, the determination was made it was going to operate in the mode that we are presenting to you today. Okay, we're not going to have any interior seating. Okay, we're going to have outdoor seating at this location. That's the determination that was made.
Without community input. Yes, I just want to make sure that determination was made without community input. So, but Terry, back to you.
But Stuart, keep in mind, like any other restaurant, that's an operational issue. Okay, community input comes at other levels. That's an operational issue. Okay, this is no different than a lot of other restaurants in College Park that currently have delivery service, currently utilize Uber Eats. It's no different.
I disagree, but I want to get to back to some of the other hands that we had. Do we have any other hands up? I can't see right now.
Stuart, this is Councilmember Mackey. I'll defer to Mr. Oates. I'd like to hear the community before I say anything. So I'll defer to the community, but I'd like to have a chance also.
This is Michael. I have one,
I'm-
I guess, additional.
It's hard to.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Thank you, Michael. I think we wanted to go to you first, then Dan Oates, and then back to Maria.
Okay. Are there, assume on these plans, are there bathrooms on site? Are there anything open to the community other than the drive-through window? And if there are bathrooms on site, are they gender neutral bathrooms? Or is this a gendered bathroom situation?
I'll defer to Dan to respond. I don't know.
Probably perfectly honest, I can't answer that question. It's more of an operational question. I can't answer that.
We'll have to get an answer for that. I don't think we have it tonight.
I mean, I'm frankly a little bit surprised by that answer, given I have to assume that you knew we were going to be asking questions about the values of this company and its treatment of the LGBTQA+ community. But I guess when you get back to us, you get back to us.
Well, to be perfectly frank, as indicated, my client could be here tonight. I'm here to address, I'm a land use attorney who's here to address the land use issues on this site. I'm not here to address anything else other than the land use issues, and to be perfectly honest, to address the amendments that are being proposed as part of this application.
Okay, let's go to Dan. Dan Oates.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Hope everyone else can get outside soon because it is a nice day. I will first preface by saying I appreciate Mr. Lynch's willingness to be here with us tonight, and note, I hope he appreciates that the community members have a different scope of interest in the project than either county planning officials or simply land use, as I think this is really about our community. So with that said, I'll just have a few, might be more question just about the proposed hours for this facility. I know that there's several bars that are not too far away. So wanting to know how, how this will be used by the people who are in the community will be important. I'd like to understand the reasoning that the applicant is seeking to remove the landscaping in the parking lot. Is that being replaced by additional parking spaces, or was there other reasoning for that? In addition to Stu's earlier question regarding bike infrastructure and any potential plans for that, I would also be interested in understanding whether the applicant will be adding infrastructure for trash and recycling. As in other parts of downtown College Park, it can often be a challenge where things can overfill on the weekends or in other places where they're used. And I think with the walk-up approach, that may be a challenge. And I'd finally just note, it was stated that this would not have a significant impact on the surrounded business model that doesn't involve people sitting inside of an Applebee's for an hour as they have dinner, would have a different impact on traffic than the prior permitted use. So I would like to understand how the applicant plans to mitigate the impact of additional traffic in the surrounding community, as I believe that would typically be a part of the application that would need to go to the county for projects such as this if it were starting from scratch. Thank you.
Dan, would you like to respond to any of those questions or comments?
Sure. With regard to removal of the landscape islands, they'll be removing those for circulation purposes, strictly for circulation purposes. Although we think there's probably enough room back there, it's just an additional obstruction. My client's very proactive in terms of the way they design their sites. So they just felt that when the vehicles and just let me point out also that the delivery vehicles will be loaded behind in the rear of the building. So for instance, if a driver comes up, he'll get his order. That'll occur in the back of the building. So they just want to free that up to make sure that there's no conflict, between the vehicles and those landscape islands. So it just made more sense. But again, what we did was that we took the trees that were located on landscape islands, and we're going to be planting new trees at three other locations on the site. So, although, again, we're going to be getting rid of that, but we're going to be replacing those trees elsewhere on the site. With regard to the off-site traffic impacts, because this is a detailed site plan, we didn't explore that, and it really wasn't required as part of this application. So I don't have any information on that particular point to share with this group. And I'm sorry, what was the other question? Excuse me.
About bike infrastructure.
Sure, I mean, that's something that's
and proposed hours of facility.
Yeah, with regard to like the bikes, that's something that is what I consider to be a fairly common response or comment from staff at Park and Planning with regard to these uses. We usually, as part of their review, we usually end up installing at least one, if not two, inverted U-shaped bike racks. So that's something we consider. We just have to find a location on the site where that will work. The hours, I don't have those hours designated. Again, that's an operational issue that has not been shared with me. And unfortunately, I don't have that I share with you tonight. But again, as I said, my client could not be here and he'd have that information for you.
Thank you. Could I ask one clarification?
Sure.
Related to delivery drivers will be accessing the facility using access points than other people. Could you give more granularity on that in terms of their planned land use for delivery?
We will have our own delivery vehicles. And then, for instance, we'll be allowing, having, Uber Eats can pick up orders here and deliver, as well as some of the other, apps that you can order food with. So again, we're not just limiting this to the blue menu delivery trucks. Uber Eats or any other companies can also pick up and deliver from the site.
But I think what you said was that the drivers would be using the back of the building, which sounded very much like a drive-through. Is that accurate?
I'm sorry, you're breaking up, and I'm sorry. Let me.
Sure. I was asking for clarification. You were noting that the delivery drivers would be using the back of the facility, which sounds like it would be essentially a drive-up or drive-through component of how they take meals to people. Is that accurate?
Well, what it is that we'll have our folks walk food out to the trucks, and then they deliver to the customer.
Great.
But it's not a drive-through. It's not a drive-through. For instance, with the drive-through, the customer actually comes to the site and goes through a drive-through lane, orders, and then picks up on site. It's different than that.
Thank you. Maria, you've been waiting patiently.
Yes, I also see that my colleague, Councilmember Rigg, is waiting, but I'll just be quick. I was wondering if there was a traffic study done at all to understand the change of the traffic, because to me, it's I consider this a kind of a dangerous place to be having so many ins and outs, Grubhub, Uber Eats, your own going in and out. And I was actually very sad to hear that the applicant isn't willing to be more considerate of the safety issues of walkers on Route 1, in insisting that the right in and right out is considered. I just was wondering, is there a traffic study that was done, and could we see it? And if the applicant would consider the safety of those walking on the sidewalks, because we've all seen delivery people and those who are in a hurry to get their food, zooming into places, and it seems to me as a very dangerous proposition. And lastly, I'd like to close that as a council member, I really would have appreciated being engaged. Thank you.
Okay, John? Councilmember Rick?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Terry. I don't mind at all being called John. Mr.
Sorry.
Lynch, thank you for joining us. I think you've had heard a fair amount of community concern this evening. You know, given the short notice of this meeting, I can tell you that there's a lot more where this came from. I think what you're hearing tonight isn't what I would characterize as sort of normal NIMBY stuff. There are a lot of fairly substantial concerns about this particular business model and the way in which it differs from the business model that was there before, or from other business models that are prohibited or not prohibited in the Route 1 corridor. In fact, that is why Chick-fil-A and yourself, I believe, came to Mr. Day and I and Michelle approximately a year ago to discuss this concept. And in that discussion, I remember very vividly that it was left sort of tenuous. Your client said, well, we don't know if we're going to proceed. We will let you know if we're going to proceed. And I said, we need lots of heads up because we need community support, or we need to pause and make sure that we have community input. And your applicant actually committed to that. Your applicant said, yes, that's very important to us. It's very important that our communities are up to speed with what it is that we're proposing to do. And that was how it was left, which is why, you know, I share my colleagues and our residents' disappointment that we weren't approached before for that bona fide community engagement before the application was made to the planning director for this modification. At this point, you're hearing frustration both on my part, but also I believe on behalf of many of our residents, that it seems as though Chick-fil-A is willing to not accommodate our concerns that we've voiced on several occasions tonight, that we voiced a year ago, and is instead purely focused on pushing forward, you know, in spite of any substantial community concerns about traffic, substantial community concerns about hours, substantial community concerns about even the values of your client, which are concerns that I share in every case. So I guess I just wanted to share my disappointment that you all were not willing and able to follow through on that commitment that you made to Mr. Day, Ms. Shum, and I a year ago, and because I think it perhaps helps you understand why you're hearing the critical tenor of the conversation tonight. I know that we have this scheduled for council next week. I'll look forward to you know, a more robust discussion among council members then. But I wanted to make sure that I made that very clear tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Rigg. So let's see. I believe we have Matthew Sawyer and then Councilwoman Whitney.
Hi, good evening, and thanks, Dan. It's nice to see you on here. I have a question, actually, and this is more probably for the community leaders. I'm curious as to what sort of oversight that was provided in the tax subsidies. Was there any type of oversight that the community would have over the use? Or I should probably clarify this with a question. Is this portion of this Bizzuto project, is this also subsidized by tax dollars?
And Matt, if I could step in, I think you're referring to the largest, I believe, tax subsidy that the city's ever provided that was allocated to this detailed site plan that went forward with the Astor Bizzuto project. And you're asking if this site was included in that subsidy, or at least substantially considered as part of that.
So Dan, I'll let you respond, but I would have to say yes, because this site was part of that overall plan.
So essentially, then our tax dollars are subsidizing this use, am I correct?
In a manner of speaking, yes.
But keep in mind, Terry, this is not part of the Bizzuto property itself. This is a separate parcel. This is I mean, for life, you may know more about it. I don't understand why this isn't even included in their detailed site plan, maybe with regard to access. This is a completely separate property from the bazooka. This is not part of the same property. And I'm assuming that whatever relief they received with regard to taxes applied strictly to their property.
Not exactly. This property was part of the detailed site plan, although not part of the redevelopment per se. But as you can see by looking at this plan, changes were made to the Applebee's property to accommodate a new road, a new access on Route 1, and a new driveway entrance into the Applebee's site. So, and that's why it was the applicant's decision to include it as the entire parcel as part of the detailed site plan, and really why you're before us tonight. So there are many questions about that when the Bazzuto application came in initially, but it was their decision, and they needed to include the whole property in the plan just to accommodate a few changes on the western end of the site, is my understanding.
But I don't understand Matthew's comment with regard. I don't understand his comment how it relates to this project.
Well, overall, the entire Bazzuto project did receive a tax subsidy, and while there's not a lot of work related to that project that's happening on the Applebee's site, it was part of the overall plan. So maybe that's not a great answer, but that's all I can add to that conversation.
So, I mean, just one more quick follow-up question then. So if indeed this is subsidized by tax dollars, what sort of oversight was provided in the, whatever documents provided those subsidies? What sort of oversight was provided but for the community, if any?
Well, there was oversight, because this was a detailed site plan submitted for review by the county. It went to a public hearing at the county planning board and received the support of the College Park City Council with conditions at the time it was approved. But at the time, there were no other changes proposed to the Applebee's site, including this particular use. So it was indicated it was necessary for them to include the entire property. Maybe that was a park and planning directive, but the only changes were fairly minor to the western part of the Applebee's property.
Do any of these changes, to your knowledge, would any of these changes, including any amendments, would they impact the ability to retain that tax subsidy?
I don't believe so, but that's probably something for the city attorney to respond to.
Matthew, this is John. If it helps, part of the history here is that the Applebee's was occupied and profitable when the Bazzuto application was put in. So they were included, I believe they were owned by the same property owner, but they were included in the detailed site plan somewhat incidentally. The city had a lot of input into the design of the broader project. I think our desire was to not disrupt, an ongoing concern at Applebee's.
Thanks for that clarification. Councilmember Whitney?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to say the other ghost kitchen in College Park is right around the corner from my house in District 2. And it has caused problems in the neighborhood. We have had, since that started, we have had issues with speeding. We have had a lot more traffic going down streets that were not designed for that level of traffic. I just recently had a meeting with the city engineer to discuss what we might possibly do in order to mitigate the impact on what used to be a very quiet street. So I think it will definitely have an impact in our city traffic wise, and I think it is inappropriate not to consider that impact as part of this change. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Wyan?
Yes, thank you. So I don't want to repeat a lot of the great comments that have already been made by residents, but one thing I do think this should I do want to focus a lot on what we are able to comment on as a city, and I think in particular the zoning questions, and in particular the idea, and I want to take strong objection to Mr. Lynch's comment that this is like every other restaurant in College Park when you're not having any indoor seating. I can only think of one other restaurant, one of the things that even serves food in College Park. And they themselves call it a ghost kitchen, and that's the Virtual X Kitchen in Berwyn, which is located in as Ms. Shum said before, an industrial area. So I'm frustrated. I want to share the frustration with my colleagues that coming in very last minute, not really engaging with the city at all on this or the community, and proposing this idea that really is going to turn in an area that we want to put a use in an area that we want to focus on walkability. You're right next to a big new multifamily residential unit where it could be very easily walkable to go to a restaurant, and you're turning it into a use that's really automobile focused. And to say that's I mean, it's a slight nuance that it's not technically a drive-through, but it will have a lot of the same impacts as a drive-through. And if I think this highlights some of the challenges we have with these new uses, new virtual kitchens and things like that, that make it that zoning really has not accounted for, that our zoning code, even with the new zoning code in the county, is trying, it's going to struggle to keep up with. But I think it would be really important for our county to really look at these issues and look at treating these uses the same way that they would a drive-through or anything else that's very automobile oriented, and not allow these in areas that are intended to be walkable nodes. I don't know if you have anything to say to that. I look forward to, I know we're going to be talking about this more next week, but I guess I just want to share my disappointment and encourage you to work with us on a use that's more appropriate for this site.
Thank you, Mayor. Maleka, do you have another question?
Well, I just wanted to ask, I had a question and a statement. I wanted to ask again, I believe the gentleman, and I apologize if I'm not remembering your name, had stated that he couldn't comment on the bathrooms. And I just want to ask, I'm not asking in terms of gender, are there going to be bathrooms, period, for the public use? Does he have any knowledge of that?
Dan, can you answer that? I do not know. There are currently bathrooms in the facility. Obviously, it was a public restaurant, but
yeah, unfortunately,
that will be open to the.
Unfortunately, I can't answer that question. There's a lot I know about this site, but I just never had that conversation with my client.
Okay.
I know there'll be access to that area for ordering. I'm not sure whether there'll be bathrooms there, but again, we can get back to you with that answer.
And I guess to piggyback on what everyone else has said, including the mayor, the main issue is that this site is not this particular plan is not the best use for this site. The traffic impact, the lack of walkability, the safety issues that it basically brings to mind. I have images in my head of students and families putting themselves at risk trying to access this place based on what the hours would be, if people would be, going there drunk, stumbling to try to get there to pick up their food, if we would have students getting hit by cars, or who knows what other kinds of incidents a site like this could bring to such a location, which is really at the heart of College Park. So it makes me question, what vision do we have for College Park? Are we trying to build a city for students and families and professionals, or are we just trying to make money? So I'm curious as to why this site seems to be so appealing for this city, for your clients.
Yeah, and again, one of the reasons why it was appealing is that it was a permitted use on the property. But other than that, they haven't shared a market study with me. They haven't shared any information. So that really goes kind of beyond the scope of what I'm handling on behalf of Chick-fil-A.
Okay, there's a few more hands. I'm not sure whether they're left over from previous questioning. So that would be Councilmember Rigg and Matthew Sawyer. Do you still have questions?
No, I'm driving, so I didn't take my down.
Oh, okay, fine.
Yeah, me either. I'm done too.
Okay, thank you. So if there are no more questions, we're almost at 8:15. I know Councilmember Adams said we had a hard stop at 8, but we've had a lot of communication back and forth. So I think it was time well spent. Are there any final comments by the council members or the mayor? As you've heard, it looks like we are getting an extension from the park and planning staff in regard to the submission of the city's comments. We don't know when exactly that will be. It's likely just to be a week, but this is enabling us to put this on a city council agenda for next Tuesday, where there will be a discussion, and we're hoping that the representative from Chick-fil-A will be able to attend, but that hasn't been confirmed at this time.
Terry, I just want to say a few words. First of all, thank you
Sure.
to the city staff for moving quickly to schedule this. Thank you to the residents for coming out and being so articulate and on point with their comments. Also want to thank the city council members throughout College Park for joining this, as well as the mayor, and want to thank Dan Lynch for joining as well. We sent you some tough questions. We really wanted to have these conversations earlier. We're a very engaged community, and I think you're hearing that very loudly. And I would encourage you, Dan, this is recorded. Terry, I hope we can provide this to Dan to send the recording to the applicant. And hopefully, Dan, you can get their commitment to listen to it and really, truly listen to the feedback that was provided and look to take action to be a true community focused operation here if this is to move forward. And we are going to continue this conversation at City Council next Tuesday. So I'll turn it over back to you, Terry, or John. I don't know if you want to say anything.
I got nothing to add. Thanks so much for coming tonight, Dan. We do appreciate it. I know it was on short notice, but again, it didn't have to go this way. So wish we had a little bit more time to discuss this with you, but we are appreciative that you were willing to join our discussion.
Okay, thank you. With that, I think we'll close the meeting. We will try to make a recording of the meeting available to anyone who is interested, and certainly to the applicant and his attorney. And we look forward to continuing the conversation next week.
Will the chat be given to Chick-fil-A also? The chat comments?
Well, the chat comments.
Please copy those and give them to Chick-fil-A also.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. With that, thank you
Thank
very
you,
much
Terry.
for your time and attention.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night, Terry. Good job.
Good night, Kenny. Good to see you. Take
See you.
care.